Hello and welcome to the Nutrition Diva podcast, a show where we take a closer look at nutrition trends, research, and headlines so that you can feel more confident about your own food choices. I'm your host, Monica Reinagel, and today we are exploring a brand new ingredient that is just starting to appear in the food supply, sweet proteins. For a while now, as I'm sure you're aware, consumers have been indicating a desire to reduce their sugar intake. At the same time, people also increasingly want to avoid artificial sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose. And so the search for healthier, low and non-calorie sweeteners has become sort of an obsession for both consumers, but also for the food industry. Manufacturers are racing to develop new ingredients that can sweeten our foods and beverages without adding calories or chemicals. Enter sweet proteins, the latest attempt to enjoy sweet foods without the consequences. Sweet proteins are naturally occurring compounds found in certain tropical plants and berries, mostly native to West Africa and Southeast Asia. Unlike conventional sweeteners, which are typically sugars or artificial compounds, sweet proteins are made up of amino acids. Now, the names of these sweet proteins, thaumatin, brazine, monolin, curcumin, miraculin, are likely to be unfamiliar, although that may soon change. And the plants that they come from are generally not used as food crops. But these proteins are anywhere from 400 to 3,000 times sweeter than sucrose or table sugar. And just as a comparison for you, the compounds in stevia and monk fruit that are increasingly used as non-caloric sweeteners are 200 to 300 times as sweet as sucrose. Some of these proteins interact with the sweet taste receptors on the tongue and produce an intense and in some cases very long-lasting sweet sensation. And others actually modify our taste perception in a way that makes sour foods taste sweet. Now, because they are proteins, sweet proteins are metabolized differently from sugars. They do not impact sugar levels. Moreover, their very intense sweetness means that only tiny amounts are needed to achieve the desired sweetness. So they also contribute very minimal calories. Now, one of the things that has people concerned about artificial sweeteners is their potential negative impact on the gut microbiome, which I have talked about in previous episodes, in particular, episode number 682. And although the research so far has been pretty limited, these new sweet proteins appear to have no effect one way or the other on the composition of the gut microbiome. So it all sounds pretty ideal, right? However, there are still a few regulatory hurdles that are limiting the widespread adoption of this ingredient in the food supply, at least for now. In order to be used in food products in the United States, any new ingredient must receive GRAS, that stands for Generally Recognized as Safe Status, from the FDA. And so far, only one of these, thaumatin, has achieved this status. But the interest in these sweeteners is definitely growing, and ongoing studies are aimed at establishing the safety and efficacy of more of these novel ingredients. Now, despite these regulatory challenges, a few products sweetened with sweet proteins are already available on the market, including various chocolate bars and sweetened beverages from a company called Oobli, that's OOBLI. Retail distribution is still pretty limited, but you can get them online, and I recently ordered up a sample pack of both the chocolates and the sweetened iced teas in order to give you my review. Oobli makes a variety of chocolate flavors, including milk chocolate and dark chocolate, with various nuts and other ingredients like crispy rice. So I got a sample pack of their minis, which were individually wrapped half-ounce squares of chocolate. 2 minis, or 1 ounce, had about 130 calories, 7 grams of fiber from chicory root, one of the prebiotic fibers that I talked about in episode number 773, and just 2 grams of sugar, which came from a small amount of coconut sugar. Most of the sweetness, however, is coming from the sweet protein ingredient. Now, by comparison, a similar size serving of Ghirardelli mini chocolate squares is 140 calories, so almost the same amount of calories. However, the Ghirardelli are lower in fiber, only 2 grams compared with 7, and they are higher in sugar, about 14 grams of sugar per ounce. So the texture of these Oobly chocolates, first rate, as was the chocolate flavor, especially in the dark chocolate. The sweet protein ingredient was definitely perceptible as a very intense sweetness with a slight bitter aftertaste. Actually, to my palate, it was not unlike stevia. And I also did notice that very long-lasting sweet aftertaste, which is not unpleasant, just a little weird. Now, I have to admit to a personal bias here. Most foods that are sweetened with low or non-caloric sweeteners, or even a mix of non-caloric sweeteners and regular sugar, are, to my palate, oversweetened. It just always feels to me like they used too much. But that may simply be the nature of the beast. Because of their very intense sweetness, any amount at all tends to taste like too much, to me anyway. And weirdly, the natural bitterness of the cocoa in the chocolate, instead of masking the bitter aftertaste of the sweet protein, it almost seemed to accentuate it. Now, you might like these chocolates more than I did, but to me, the unpleasant level of sweetness and that bitter aftertaste just isn't worth it in order to save the relatively small amount of sugar that I would get from regular dark chocolate. I also sampled several of the Oobly sweetened tea flavors, and I liked them much better than I did the chocolates. They are also sweetened with a combination of sweet proteins and other sweeteners, in this case, agave nectar and various fruit purees. So these purees, mango and peach, they add a very nice, fresh flavor, and the aftertaste of those sweet proteins was not as bothersome to me in the beverages as it was in the chocolates. Each can contains 60 to 80 calories and around 7 grams of sugar. So again, this is not a completely sugar or calorie-free beverage, but it is significantly lower in both sugar and calories than a regularly sweetened tea and fruit juice beverage. While I did find them enjoyable, the truth is I rarely drink sugar-sweetened or artificially sweetened beverages, and that's not a habit I'm eager to pick up. So I will be sticking mostly with unsweetened tea or seltzer with a squeeze of citrus or a splash of fruit juice if I want a little extra flavor. So here's my bottom line on this interesting new ingredient. Sweet proteins offer a novel alternative for reducing sugar intake, providing intense sweetness with minimal calories and no impact on blood sugar levels. However, as I talked about in episode number 451, I think this never-ending quest to find the perfect sweetener, one that provides unlimited sweetness without any consequences, is a bit misguided. Opting for beverages or desserts that are sweetened with low or non-caloric sweeteners may reduce our added sugar intake, but these foods are still not likely to be contributing much to the overall nutritional quality of our diets. Also, in my experience, frequent consumption of these hyper-sweetened foods and beverages can actually diminish the appeal of more nutritious but less intensely sweet foods, such as fresh fruit. For that reason, instead of viewing these as a pass to consume them in unlimited quantities, I would still encourage you to enjoy these things, if you do enjoy them, in moderation. And if you are consuming them in moderation, then you may find, as I do, that you can actually just go ahead and enjoy the real thing instead. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, you can email it to me at nutrition@quickanddirtytips.com. You can also leave me a voicemail at 443-961-6206. I always love to hear your voice. If you're looking for more support for healthy weight management, please check out the tools and the resources at wayless.life, where I help people create the habits, the mindset, and the lifestyle that help them weigh less without dieting. You'll find that at wayless.life. And I'd also like to invite you to check out my other podcast. It's called The Change Academy, where we explore the art and science of creating positive behavior change. You'll find that on all the major podcast platforms. Just search for Change Academy. Nutrition Diva is a quick and dirty tips podcast, and our team includes Brandon Getchus, Nathan Sems, Davina Tomlin, Holly Hutchings, and Morgan Christensen. That's all for this episode. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week.